want to move over to our next presenter, to Minoru Nishi. And Minoru is far away from Hawaii in the South Pacific, but has an equally interesting journey. And I think the part that I love so much about these kind of webinars is the value of being able to network. And Donna and Minoru only met each other about 2 years ago, but have already visited each other's factories and shared tips and tricks and information. So I think there's just so much value in this kind of collaboration. And so we're thankful that they're also sharing these insights from their businesses. So I'll now hand it over to Minoru Nishi from Nishi Trading, and also, as we mentioned, the chairman of Pacific Farm Organizations. So Minoru, you have 20 minutes. That should bring us to about 55 or 5 minutes to the hour.
Thank you, Kyle, and good morning to everyone, especially to the chairman of COLEAD and Isalina. Thank you for the opportunity. And I just listened to your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman. We have a lot in common between your region and our region in the Pacific, and it's really nice to hear that. And I'm sure that we can find time to collaborate in the future. Just to start off, I guess I'm very different from Dana's operation in Uru Cooperative in Hawaii, in the sense that we are mainly fresh produce at the moment, but migrating over to value adding, although we've done some work in the last few years and research into breadfruit production and processing it into flour and also frozen. But there's definitely a lot of challenges along our way, because we live in Tonga as a small island nation, very different from Hawaii, and whereby they rely all the consumption from imported goods. In terms of the business, a second generation business, family business. My father was a subsistence grower here in Tonga, just like any other farmer in Tonga back in the early 70s. So we started off with 8-acre piece of land here, and we've grown the business over the years, relying only on export of fresh squash to Japan market, which was a booming industry here, which got up to about $400 million. And it's now a dying industry in Tonga, which was one of the reasons why we decided to try and diversify into other crops and find other opportunities in other markets in order to survive. Now we lease most of our land, and most of the land here in Tonga is owned by the nobles and the king. And so every household or male Tongan can only have a maximum of 8 acres, and then the rest is freehold, and then the rest you have to lease out. So the company was registered in 1999, and we've leased about 240 acres of land now for the company as our base. And then we contract smallholder farmers to supply the company with various produce. Like I said before, we started off with squash, and then we dropped the squash. And for the first time this year, we will not be growing squash for the Asian market. Used to be Japan and Korea. But because of the high cost of freight and the uncertainty of the market, being a small player in such a huge a market, we've had to diversify. And so our main market now is in New Zealand and going into Australia. So this snapshot here is really just a photo of the two areas in our factory that we're focusing on. The one on the right there is the ladies processing our frozen breadfruit, and the left is the breadfruit flour. And that's been work done for about 9 years of research work with Tokyo University of Agriculture and our local partner here, Māori Tonga Trust, and the government of Tonga, and funded by the Japanese government and also the university. So we're able to make really high quality breadfruit flour, but the supply is the major issue for us right now. So next slide, please, Excel. So I was given 3 questions to look at. What was the basis for selecting the crops we work with? 2, what are the current market situation for these products? And thirdly, what are some of the key constraints to growth? Next slide. And in addressing these questions, I think it was important for us to look at the analysis of the sector overall in Tonga from a private sector perspective. So these are just some of my thoughts of the strengths, the weaknesses, and opportunities and threats to existence of our business in Tonga. The strengths here, we have good fertile soil in Tonga. I think we have some of the best soils in the Pacific. But a lot of it is arable land, unused. So we have opportunities to grow more crops here for our own sustainability. We have an ideal climate here for growing crops, but also traditional crops here for self-sufficiency. I think during COVID periods, there was a lot of backyard gardening promoted in the Pacific, and especially here in Tonga. But there's room here for us to diversify and grow more of our local crops, but also promote that locally. In terms of weaknesses, I think one of the key areas why we diversified into value adding is the post-harvest losses. Started with the squash business and then also the watermelons. And so it was a big part of our decision to try and get into value adding. The economies of scale here, most of our farmers here, about 95% of our farmers are smallholder farmers and only 5% in commercial. And most of the commercial farmers here are in root crops, frozen crops for exports. We rely heavily on imported food for our consumption. About 60% of the food we consume are all processed and imported, which has a huge negative impact on our health for our people. I think NCDs here is a big killer of our people, and about the average life expectancy of our people now is down to about 64 years old. We lack technical support for our production, both research and development and also extension services for the farmers. And hence why we've done a lot of work as a company internally to reach out to overseas institutions such as the Tokyo University of Agriculture and other institutions for research work, which is really demand driven by the farmers addressing our needs at the grassroots level and at production level. Logistics and freight costs is a huge constraint for us with the isolation where we are in the Pacific and the high cost of fuel, also impacted by the wars around the world. So we're having to look at ways to address some of these issues in terms of logistics. In terms of opportunities, I think we have an opportunity here for niche marketing. We have, in our case here, a sound export based with our importers in New Zealand mainly. And so we're able to get our products in there. But because we're so small in the Pacific, the population of only 104,000, we have to go niche. Import substitution to address the high dependency of imports. I think there's an area here for growth. And also a big part here is the value adding, looking at developing new industries for food security and also employment generation. And of course, the last one here is improve the local technical capacity of our people, engaging with experts like Richard and so forth to bring them over here and build capacity. And that's a long-term investment that we need to continue in order to build capacity. In terms of threat, I think number one here is climate change. And I think this is everybody on the planet. And it's a growing concern for us, especially in the Pacific. And I think this is something we need to put more effort in there and help farmers adapt and to change in terms of climate. International market volatility, like I said before, with the squash and the war in Ukraine. So having to diversify into other crops is an ongoing initiative of ours in terms of value adding. Currency fluctuations, again, the fuel costs, and we're dependent on foreign currency for most of our production for export. And so that has impact on our bottom line. This is another big one here, the loss of human resources. Most of our, it's actually growing every year, and we're finding it really difficult now. Every week we are having to get new employees because they're only here very short term, and then they use our company as a name in order to apply for jobs overseas in New Zealand and Australia for seasonal workers. So it's good in a way that foreign currency comes through labor force, but it's also draining our skilled labor force in Tonga and affecting our production. Natural disasters and COVID, and then biosecurity risks of fresh produce, which is another concern for us, and hence why the need to look at value adding. And of course, logistics with shipping. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides. Okay, next slide, please. So looked at 3 crop lines here for the decision for going into evaluating. A big one here is watermelon losses. In 2020, we lost about 70% of our watermelons due to the interception of fruit fly in New Zealand. And therefore, a lot of these farmers had to dump their watermelons, feeding pigs in the local market, or just giving it away in sacks. So it was a huge concern for us as a business, but also for the country. And so, you know, we looked at the farmers asked us, what can we do with our, you know, with our reject watermelons? Because the biosecurity and protocol for pathway watermelons into New Zealand is so high that most of it gets rejected here in Tonga. And so we looked at opportunities to freeze or make juice out of that, and we brought in a expert out of New Zealand to look at the viability of that. We haven't been able to achieve that because I think there's a bit more work still to be done. But I'll mention a little bit about that later on in the piece to show what can be done in the near future, hopefully. Squash, it gets up to about 40% reject in terms of grading in the pack house, and again demonstrates just the impact of fresh exports to overseas markets that, you know, we really need to look at evaluating. The breadfruit one is an interesting one. It's an informal industry still here in Tonga, very much so. On average, there's about 3 breadfruit trees in the backyard of each household in Tonga, and that's not counting the tax allotment, but there's a lot more. But on average, there's about 68% reject on the ground that just rots in homes. This year, we're seeing probably the most fruit on the trees this season, and we've just started advertising and processing breadfruit this last couple of weeks, and we're having a meeting with Darren on Friday to see how we can secure some breadfruit for her off season in Hawaii, which is going to be an interesting one. But yeah, so a lot of people are calling, even from the outer islands now, asking us if we can take their breadfruit. So we're restricted in the fact that we don't have a processing center there. We don't have the right technical expertise to look at how we can actually capture some of that. So there's a lot of work in progress in that area for the future. Next slide, please. So the key areas of focus for us is looking at product diversification, more into root crops such as cassava, taro, turmeric. We've planted a lot of turmeric recently. There's a demand. We're looking at import substitution just for the locals, but also value adding for export into maybe a niche market into the United States, where we had visitors last year come to us. The drought in the last couple of years has meant that taro, there's a massive taro shortage now here in Tonga, but also Samoa. I also understand that they have a shortage of taro, which is driving the price in New Zealand and Australia, and the demand is high. As it stands now, we can't supply the market with the current supply. Import substitution, we're increasing our production of potatoes and onions for the local market. We brought in a volunteer agronomist from Australia last year who helped expand our season. So rather than just planting once or twice, we're able to plant maybe 4 times of our potatoes this year, and then twice on the onions. Again, expanding our opportunity for the domestic market and cutting the imports, but also raising income for families here, and also the government in terms of taxes. We pay 15% on sales tax to the government through our domestic sales of fresh produce or any processed produce here in Tonga. And promotion of healthier locally grown processed foods such as Moringa and the breadfruit and the turmeric. Again, addressing the issue of NCDs in the local market. Next slide, please. This is some of the products that we're currently working on in terms of evaluating. Like I said before, the watermelons, but also we have a citrus project here with ACIR, which is a Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research in Australia. We're in our 6th year of that project, and it's going really well. A lot of people here didn't think that citrus will grow well here in Tonga, but in our first year we had a lot of our limes, lemons fruited, and in our third and fourth year we started seeing the mandarins, and now we're mobilizing a lot of those trees into the communities and propagating that with our NGO partner, Minoru Tonga Trust. And so we're in our second phase of this project, and hoping to improve and expand on that in order to look at evaluating. On the right there, you see there's the two pictures there of a watermelon, frozen watermelon pulp in red and limes. I saw this in my recent trip to Thailand, where I was prompted by the juicing specialist out of Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, to look at this in Thailand. So I bought that in a supermarket in Thailand and brought it back with me. So this is something we're going to look at, because there's also a lot of limes being grown in the communities here through our project. But my main concern here is looking how we can actually utilize the rejects from the watermelons of the growers, rather than having them all wasted on the side of the road or feeding pigs. The breadfruit, some of the products that we make from breadfruit, the flour, we pack them into 500 grams. Our limitation here is equipment. We're not at the scale of Dana yet, but we do believe that it's a really good quality breadfruit flour. We've had orders from the market in Australia. They wanted 2 containers of this 500-gram packs. And I said to them, "Well, come back maybe in 3 years' time," and we've had production up and actually have equipment in the facility to process flour. But I think most of the products here will go into frozen, and then the small portion, maybe 10% of that, will go into flour, and will be probably similar to the path that Dana has taken in evaluating, but it's going to take us a little bit more time. The squash we've tried also. There's 3 types of squash that we have growing here: butternut, butterkin, and pumpkin. That we've bought the rejects from the growers and started making hummus. It took off really well here, but we were just trying to educate the consumers here to take our frozen pumpkin packs, which is the yellow packs that you see, and make the hummus at home. But people were wanting, for convenience, they wanted us to make it. we didn't have the human resource, the manpower to actually do that, but we actually made a really nice hummus. So what we've done now is just focus on making frozen chunks, and we've sent 3 tons into the New Zealand market of 3 different varieties to try and test it. And so far we've had really good feedback from the New Zealand market on this trial that went a few weeks back. We've also packed our fresh and frozen produce into cartons, which are in about 20 kg cartons, and we sent off our first container of frozen taro, cassava, and frozen pumpkin to New Zealand market, and that's been well received. So again, it's just the packaging, trying to get it doing a little bit more different, and to be competitive in the market with different packaging. And it's been received really well in the New Zealand market. We also do the same for our watermelons. It's air freighted. The current market situation, sorry, the next slide. The current market situation for the watermelons, and we've received 2 orders now for our watermelons into New Zealand. 1,100 ton. One company is 500 ton, and the other is 600 ton. We had 2 more importers to come with their orders. But unfortunately, I don't think with the capacity we have, we'll be able to get 1,100 ton. Our target this year is 500 ton. Last year we did 30 ton and was all air freighted. Back in 2020 and 21, we did almost 500 ton. But because of the COVID and also the shipping issue and the fruit fly interception in New Zealand, the confidence in the farmers dropped significantly, and then they pulled back from growing. But this year there's a lot of farmers coming forward to grow, because we've been able to secure air freight options for them. In terms of the breadfruit in New Zealand market, there's a minimum of 600 metric ton demand from the market there, but we also have gaps in the local market in the off season, so we're trying to process that through this year and hopefully hold some here for the domestic market in the off season. At the same time, hopefully we can send some to Hawaii. Similar with taro, the taro market is booming in New Zealand and Australia, but there's a shortage because of the drought last year. Next slide. So this is some the constraints for our growth, the technical training support for our processing here, for our staff, but also our farmers. This picture on the left here is just youth that we've employed in the pack house. All of them now have all gone on overseas workers scheme into New Zealand, Australia. And then, sorry, can go back one more. And then the picture on the right there is a school that we've high school here that we've given our facility free of charge as part of our outreach charity to them. They've processed over 3 containers here of frozen cassava and taro in order to support the operation of the school in the last 2 years. And we've also helped grow some of their crops, and then also bought some of their taro for our own market overseas. This is our cool store in the middle, and this is where we elect technical support for equipment, but also training of the operation of the management of the facility. We've since now cut this into 2 areas, into 2 chambers, and we've got some support from Farmer Plus, which is another organization in the region supported by New Zealand, Australia, to bring a scientist next month to do some scoping work here, to put more equipment here in order to control the temperatures of the various crops that we bring in here in order to prolong the shelf life. We also still lack a lot of equipment. Dana's probably more advanced in that space. Since meeting Dana here in Tonga, I've also bought some peeling machines, a little bit different from Dana. It's more semi-manual and automatic, but that's helped increase the productivity in terms of our peeling of our taro and also breadfruit. But we're still a long way in order to scale production. The high energy costs here in Tonga is huge. The power here costs about $1.06 a kilowatt an hour, which is quite significant. It used to be 82 cents. And so what we've done here is put in solar in order to address the high cost of energy. And of course, the unreliable high freight costs, which I talked about before. Okay, the solution, in terms of our technical support, we've hired a food processing specialist from Fiji, and with over 20 years of experience. This person is hopefully going to arrive later this week, and hopefully he'll run the factory, but also the pack house in terms of providing technical training for the staff, but also making sure that it's viable. We're also partnering with Farmer Plus and PFO to bring technical support for our production on the farm, but also cool store. Like I said before, we're bringing in a farmer that's been working, an agronomist that's been working for British American Tobacco for 22 years in Fiji. And again, hopefully we'll get him in the next month or so in order to run the farm and run workshops for our farmers in terms of our production for our produce that we export. I talked about the solar already, so I don't need to mention that. And also we've secured air freight space for all produce to New Zealand on a weekly basis. We've just confirmed yesterday from Air New Zealand again that they're putting in another flight at the end of May. So 2 flights a week now on a Wednesday and Friday, and with a space of 30 ton per flight, which is going to double our capacity from last year to 60 ton a week, which is a great opportunity for us to capitalize on this. And the freight rate, although is higher than the sea freight rate, but they're able to drop the price down by about 2/3, which is a big plus for us to make sure that the produce gets to market in a good condition, but also still happy for the farmers to take a cut in terms of the return, but at least they find the guaranteed revenue and paid on as soon as the ship leaves. Okay. Next slide. I think that's it for me, Kyle, and the team. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minoru, for sharing that amazing journey. And I know that those constraints just take up a few bullet points, but in reality, they are huge. And so thank you for sharing just the story of innovation and being able to adapt